The Xilorians arrived with all the grandeur humanity had imagined alien visitors would bring. Dazzling ships that seemed to shimmer and shift in the atmosphere like they were made of liquid light. The first glimpse of their colossal craft caused global astonishment, with people flocking to observation points in awe as they hovered over major cities. The media dubbed them the Silent Ones, for their craft made no sound as they entered Earth's atmosphere. A world united for a brief moment in wonder, staring up at the strange, beautiful visitors. At first, the Xilorians did everything to play their part in the human drama of peaceful integration. Their leader, Sovereign Tharn, a towering figure with a smooth, pale exoskeleton and piercing, luminescent eyes, addressed the world's leaders via holographic transmission. His voice was calm and soothing, with a strange, almost hypnotic quality. "We come not as conquerors, but as survivors," he spoke, his words flowing with an unmistakable charisma. "The cataclysm that destroyed our homeworld has left us scattered, lost in the void. We seek only refuge, a place to rebuild, to live in harmony with your kind. Together, we can unlock the stars." Humanity, long accustomed to conflict and division, saw this as an opportunity to rise above the fractured state they had been in for centuries. The United Nations quickly extended a formal invitation to the Xilorians, offering them an alliance. World leaders held discussions, laying the groundwork for cooperation. Some were cautious, but the majority embraced the idea, thinking the technological boon the Xilorians promised would propel humanity into a new golden age. The first exchanges were promising. The Xilorians shared their advanced technology, systems for energy production that would solve Earth's growing environmental crisis, and medical treatments that could cure diseases humanity had long struggled with. Their ships were equipped with incredible weaponry, but instead of using them for war, they claimed to offer them as tools for defense and protection. Yet beneath the surface, a growing unease began to gnaw at Dr. Rachel Moore. She had been assigned to the joint research project between humans and Xilorians, studying their medical technology. What started as an exciting opportunity soon became a quiet source of worry. Dr. Moore had an intuitive sense that something wasn't quite right about the Xilorians' demeanor. They were polite, even gracious, but there was an aloofness about them that she couldn't shake. As she spent more time with their scientists, she began to notice subtle contradictions in their stories. There were too many questions unanswered about their history, why their homeworld had been destroyed, for example, and why they were so willing to give up their superior technology so freely. Their supposed destruction seemed odd, almost rehearsed. Why were they offering so much, so quickly, with no expectation of anything in return? And then, one evening, Rachel was at her workstation, reviewing data files, when she stumbled across a hidden message encrypted within a routine medical report. The Xilorians had left behind a small trail, something buried within the medical protocols that looked like a report on human biological adaptability. The more she dug, the more unsettling the documents became. Detailed studies on human physiology, mental patterns, and even genetic mapping. Before she could investigate further, a warning flashed across her screen, and the room around her seemed to flicker in an unnatural way. The doors to the lab shut with a hiss. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Someone, or something, was watching her. Rachel quickly erased the data and stood up, her mind racing. Was the peaceful facade crumbling? Had Earth made a terrible mistake in welcoming the Xilorians? Her fears would soon be confirmed, but she had no idea how quickly they would come to light. The following weeks were filled with a subtle, growing sense of tension. The public remained captivated by the Xilorians' promises, their elegant, seemingly benevolent gestures of goodwill, and the stunning technology they had shared. The first few medical breakthroughs, cures for diseases that had long plagued humanity, were hailed as miracles. Energy crises were being solved, and the people of Earth, after decades of war and environmental ruin, began to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The Xilorians had given them hope. But in the shadows, Dr. Rachel Moore's unease deepened. Despite the overwhelming benefits the Xilorians had offered, the questions kept mounting in her mind. Why were they so interested in Earth's biological systems? Why had they shown such intense interest in the military's most secure facilities, always positioning themselves just close enough to observe, but never actually engage? It all seemed too calculated, too controlled. Late one night, as Rachel sat in her office at the research facility, a low hum filled the room. It was the kind of noise that seemed to vibrate in her bones, an almost imperceptible frequency she couldn't shake. A small, blinking light on her computer caught her attention, an alert she hadn't seen before. It was a standard encryption protocol, but this one was different. This one wasn't supposed to be in the system. Her heart skipped. Someone had been tampering with the data. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the security protocol as she dug deeper into the files. As the screen blinked, new information flashed before her eyes. Coordinates, human genetics research, even the location of certain military bases. The Xilorians weren't just studying Earth, they were mapping it, and not in a way that suggested peace. Suddenly, a harsh buzzing filled the room, and the data vanished. The files had been remotely deleted. Panic surged through Rachel's chest. She knew what she had found was dangerous, too dangerous for just her to handle, but there was no time to waste. She quickly gathered her things, ready to bring this information to the authorities, when she heard a soft knock at the door. Her breath caught. She knew that knock. It was too precise, too intentional. Someone was waiting outside. The door hissed open before she could react, and in stepped a tall, imposing figure, one of the Xilorian emissaries, Callan. "You're still awake, Dr. Moore," Callan said, his voice smooth and controlled, but his eyes betrayed an unsettling flicker. "There is much to discuss." Rachel froze, her mind racing. Callan, with his near-perfect human mimicry, was an anomaly. His physical form appeared almost human, save for the strange translucent scales that shimmered faintly beneath his skin. He had been one of the Xilorians who had worked closely with her team, assisting in the research exchanges. On the surface, he seemed courteous, even friendly. But now, his presence felt more like an interrogation than a casual meeting. I was just reviewing some data," Rachel stammered, trying to mask the panic in her voice. I think there's been some kind of error in the system." Callan tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "An error, you say? Errors can be problematic, especially when they are discovered." The words hung in the air, laden with a menacing edge. Rachel's stomach churned, the intensity of his gaze deepened, and she realized, with growing horror, that Callan already knew what she had uncovered. The Xilorians had been watching her for much longer than she had realized. Without warning, Callan stepped forward, his movements unnervingly fluid, and placed a cold hand on her shoulder. His grip was strong, unyielding. "Dr. Moore," he said, his voice low, "you've seen too much. The time for questions has passed. It's time for you to understand the truth." Before Rachel could react, she was surrounded by a sudden rush of motion. Xilorian soldiers materialized out of nowhere, their forms flickering in and out of existence like shadows. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls stretching and warping in a way that felt unnatural. Panic surged through her veins. But in that moment, something inside Rachel snapped. The truth was clear now. The Xilorians were not here for peace. They were here to conquer. With a burst of adrenaline, she grabbed the nearest object, a heavy data pad, and smashed it against the control panel, sending sparks flying. The explosion triggered a series of alarms throughout the facility, and the Xilorians hesitated, momentarily caught off guard by the chaos. Rachel ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to get out, to warn the others before it was too late. But as she sprinted down the hallway, her mind couldn't shake one chilling thought. The war for Earth had already begun, and humanity had been blind to the threat at its doorstep. The escape from the facility had been a blur. Rachel Moore's mind raced as she navigated the maze of corridors, her heart pounding like a drumbeat in her chest. She had barely managed to evade capture, but the knowledge she carried was heavier than any physical burden. The Xelorians had infiltrated Earth in ways that defied belief, and their true intentions were far more sinister than anyone had ever imagined. Rachel made her way to the secure government base where General Marcus Hale was coordinating military defenses. She knew that time was running out, and she needed to get the truth to him, and fast. The Xelorians had made their move, but humanity had barely begun to understand the depth of the threat they faced. Upon arriving at the base, Rachel was immediately ushered into the command room, where General Hale stood with a small group of high-ranking officers. The tension in the room was palpable. News of the Xelorian attack had already spread across the globe. Cities were burning, entire military installations had been wiped off the map, and the world was on the brink of panic. "Dr. Moore," General Hale greeted her gravely. "We've received reports. The Xelorians launched a full-scale assault on 3 major military hubs this morning. We were caught off guard." Rachel didn't waste any time with pleasantries. "General, I know what's happening. The Xelorians are not refugees. They're invaders. They've been planning this for months, maybe even years. Their offer of peace, it was all a lie." The room fell silent. General Hale's sharp eyes never left her face, reading her with a practiced gaze. "Are you sure about this, Dr. Moore?" Rachel nodded, her voice firm. "I've seen their records, their plans. They've been using us, studying us like lab rats. They're systematically dismantling our defenses and sowing chaos behind the scenes. They knew exactly how to strike. This wasn't an accident. It's an invasion." Hale took a deep breath, his face hardening. "We've underestimated them, but now we're in a war for survival. We need to hit back, hard. But we have no idea what kind of force we're up against. If they've been monitoring us, they'll know our every move before we make it." Rachel's mind spun with possibilities. Earth's military was powerful, but not powerful enough to take on an enemy who could anticipate their every move. They needed an edge, a way to fight back that would catch the Xelorians off guard. "I may have something," Rachel said, her voice quieter now. She was holding back a breath as she continued. "When I was studying their technology, I found a vulnerability, something in their energy systems. It's a flaw in their propulsion systems, but it's tied to their weapons. If we can exploit it, we might be able to cripple their fleet." The officers exchanged skeptical glances, but General Hale's expression softened slightly. "Explain. We're out of options here." Rachel pointed to a large holographic map of the world, zooming in on the Xelorian fleet's position. "Their ships rely on an energy source we don't fully understand, but I found a pattern in the way they deploy their power. There's a weakness in their central core that distributes power to their weapons and shields. If we can disrupt this core, we could take down their ships." Hale's gaze sharpened. "How certain are you about this?" "Certain enough that I think it's our only shot," Rachel replied. Hale's jaw clenched. "We need to act fast. The longer we wait, the more of Earth they'll control. Prepare your team, Dr. Moore. We're launching a counteroffensive, and we're doing it tonight." The room was filled with a mixture of disbelief and determination. They were being asked to do the impossible, to fight back against a foe that had superior technology, who could predict their every move. But one thing became clear: humanity had nothing left to lose. As the night unfolded, the global military mobilized with unprecedented coordination. Nations that had once been at odds were now fighting side by side, as if all of Earth had suddenly awakened to the same truth. The Xelorians were here to destroy them. Ships were prepared, weapons were loaded, and a sense of unity began to take root as humanity's greatest minds worked around the clock to exploit the Xelorians' weakness. It wasn't just about military might anymore. It was about survival. It was about showing the Xelorians that humans weren't helpless, that they could adapt, they could fight, and they could win. The world held its breath as the first wave of humanity's retaliation surged forward, a defiant strike against their would-be conquerors. The first wave of humanity's retaliation was nothing short of chaotic. General Marcus Hale had made it clear, strike fast and hard, before the Xilorians had time to regroup. But nothing could have prepared Earth for the fury of their response. The Xilorians weren't just invaders, they were meticulous strategists, and every move the human forces made seemed to play into their hands. The first missile strike, designed to take down one of their massive command ships, was intercepted before it could even reach its target. What followed was a display of destructive power that felt almost otherworldly. A streak of blue light flashed across the sky, followed by the deafening roar of an explosion. A human air carrier, one of the largest and most advanced warships in Earth's arsenal, was torn apart in an instant. The Xilorians had deployed a new weapon, a high-energy pulse that shattered human ships with terrifying precision. No one had seen it coming. "This isn't just war," General Hale muttered, staring at the smoking remains of the carrier on the holographic screen. "It's annihilation." Within hours, the Xilorian fleet began systematically decimating Earth's strongest military outposts. Their plasma beams tore through fortifications like paper, reducing once proud cities to ruins. What had begun as an ambitious counteroffensive was rapidly devolving into a desperate struggle for survival. The human forces, once confident in their plans, found themselves outmatched and outmaneuvered at every turn. The Xilorians had studied Earth's military strategies and tactics with disturbing precision. They anticipated every countermeasure and counterattack, dismantling human defenses with ruthless efficiency. Cities were lost, key defense hubs destroyed, and entire military divisions were decimated in the blink of an eye. The world was in turmoil. Back at the secure base, Rachel Moore was pacing nervously, her mind reeling. She had never anticipated the sheer scale of devastation that the Xilorians were capable of. For a brief moment, humanity had tasted victory, but now, that fleeting hope seemed distant, buried beneath the rubble of broken cities and shattered dreams. The military had failed to retaliate effectively, and the world's leaders were scrambling to formulate a new plan, but there was no time left for hesitation. Humanity's response had been woefully inadequate. General Hale's voice echoed in her mind. "We need something more, something unexpected." It was at this moment of overwhelming despair that something unexpected did happen. Kalen, the Xilorian defector who had secretly aligned himself with humanity, reappeared. His transmission came in the dead of night, a quiet whisper that cut through the otherwise calm static. The last thing anyone expected was an ally from the enemy's ranks. But Kalen had a message that could shift the balance of power, if humanity was willing to listen. "I know you're on the edge of defeat." Kalen's voice crackled through the speakers. "But you have one chance left. I've found their weakness." Rachel's heart skipped. "What do you mean? What weakness?" Kalen's voice was steady, but there was an edge of urgency beneath it. "The energy core that powers their fleet. It's not indestructible. I found a way to breach it. But you need to strike now. You're running out of time." Rachel exchanged a tense look with General Hale. "How do you know this?" she demanded. "I know because I was part of the team that built it," Kalen replied, his voice tinged with regret. "I helped design the power systems that now threaten to wipe out your world. But I never agreed with the Sovereign's plans. I defected because I realized the truth. We're not here to protect you. We're here to subjugate you. If you want to survive, you need to hit them where it hurts." General Hale leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Give us the details, Kalen. We'll need to move fast." Kalen's transmission revealed more than just a plan. It revealed a blueprint for hope. The vulnerability was clear. The Xilorians' fleet relied on a massive central reactor, one that was capable of generating incredible amounts of power. But like any system, it had a critical flaw, a core component that, if damaged, would disrupt the flow of energy to their weapons and shields. It was the perfect target. But there was a catch. The Xilorians had designed this system with extreme redundancy, meaning a single strike wouldn't be enough. The core had to be hit precisely, in multiple places, to cause a total cascade failure. "We need a team of specialists to infiltrate the fleet," Kalin said, his tone growing more serious. "And you need to do it quickly. Once the core goes down, their ships will go offline. But the longer you wait, the more they'll adapt." Rachel looked at Hale, who was already giving orders to his staff. They had no choice but to trust Kalin. Time was running out. The tension at the command center was palpable. Hours had passed since Kalin's message, and General Hale's team had scrambled to organize humanity's last chance at survival. With the Xilorians' overwhelming strength and uncanny ability to anticipate Earth's moves, they knew that any misstep could be fatal. This was no longer just a fight for victory. It was a desperate gamble for their very existence. Rachel Moore stood alongside Hale, staring at the holographic map of the Xilorian fleet. The fleet loomed off the coast, a vast and intimidating presence that stretched across the sky like a constellation of doom. Overwhelmingly superior in both numbers and firepower, it seemed an impossible task for Earth's forces to overcome. "The window for attack is closing," Rachel muttered, her eyes fixed on the map. "Kalin's right. If we don't strike now, they'll reinforce that central reactor. They'll make it impenetrable." Hale clenched his fists, the weight of the decision bearing down on him. "We don't have time for mistakes. This is it. We take out their reactor, and we take out their fleet. If this fails..." He didn't need to finish the thought. The consequences of failure were clear. The world would fall, and humanity's last stand would be for nothing. Rachel took a deep breath and turned to the team of specialists she had assembled. A group of highly trained operatives, pilots, engineers, and tactical experts stood at attention, their faces grim but resolute. They were the best humanity had to offer, and they were about to face the greatest challenge of their lives. "We don't get a second chance at this," she said, her voice firm. "The Xilorians will expect us to try and break through their defenses, but they won't be ready for the kind of strike we're planning. The mission is simple: infiltrate the fleet, breach the core reactor, and cripple their power grid. We hit them fast and hard, and we don't look back." The team nodded, fully aware of the odds stacked against them. They had no illusions about the danger ahead. Every instinct told them this mission was a suicide run, but they had no choice. Humanity's fate rested on their shoulders. Outside the command center, the first wave of ships prepared for launch. The pilots climbed into their fighter jets, their faces set in determination as they sealed themselves into their cockpits. The engineers boarded their specialized tech vessels, armed with EMPs and hacking tools that would allow them to breach the Xilorians' advanced security systems. As the countdown began, Rachel felt a surge of emotion. Fear, but also something else. A quiet defiance. The Xilorians had underestimated humanity. They had seen a fractured, divided species, incapable of uniting. But what they hadn't accounted for was the indomitable spirit that burned within every human heart. When pushed to the brink, humanity could fight with a ferocity that no alien invader could predict. The ships launched in unison, streaking into the atmosphere like a swarm of wasps. The sleek, human-made fighters darted toward the heart of the Xilorian fleet, dodging incoming fire from the alien ships. It was a full-on assault, a last-ditch effort to give humanity a fighting chance. On the ground, General Hale's team monitored the operation from the command center. Every moment felt like an eternity. The data came in fast: pilot reports, enemy movements, real-time tracking of the fleet's responses. It was clear that the Xilorians had shifted into full combat mode. Their ships were lighting up with plasma blasts, and the human forces were doing everything they could to stay one step ahead. Approaching the core reactor, one of the pilots radioed in, his voice tight with tension. "Shields are holding. For now." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The core was the heart of the Xilorian fleet, and it was heavily guarded. But with the element of surprise on their side, the human forces had breached the outer defenses. Now, they had to disable the core. One shot, one chance. As the assault team neared the reactor, the Xylorians retaliated with everything they had. A massive wave of energy surged from the heart of the fleet, and for a moment, it seemed like the entire mission was doomed to fail. The human ships shuddered under the onslaught, and one by one, their systems began to flicker. The odds were turning against them. But then, as if out of nowhere, the signal came. EMP deployed. Core systems are vulnerable. Rachel felt a flood of relief. The operatives had succeeded in breaching the security measures and disabled the core's protective shields. This was it, the final moment. She exchanged a glance with General Hale, who was watching the feeds with intense focus. If this attack failed, humanity would be done for. One final push. The human pilots launched a coordinated strike directly at the heart of the Xylorian core, targeting the exposed energy flow. It was a gamble, a shot in the dark, but it was their only chance. The explosion that followed was unlike anything they had ever seen. A shockwave of energy erupted from the heart of the fleet, rippling through the Xylorian ships like a storm. The reactor shattered, and the fleet's weapons systems went dark. The Xylorians were crippled. For a brief moment, silence filled the command center. No one spoke. No one moved. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then, the cheers erupted. Humanity had won their first true victory in the war. The victory was short-lived. The explosion had devastated the Xylorian fleet, and for the first time since the invasion began, humanity felt the sweet rush of triumph. But as the dust settled, and the once imposing warships of the Xylorian invaders drifted helplessly in orbit, a new chilling realization began to set in. They were not the ones who had been defeated. Not yet. General Marcus Hale, standing in the command center, stared at the monitors in disbelief. The Xylorians' once mighty fleet had been crippled, yes, but there were still signs of life. The alien ships, though now immobilized, began to flicker with a strange, almost imperceptible pulse. It wasn't the hum of their engines. It was something else, something deeply unsettling. "What's happening?" Hale demanded, his voice sharp with concern. Rachel Moore, her mind racing, worked furiously at her console. She quickly tapped into the feeds, analyzing the data from the now disabled fleet. Her eyes widened. "They're not finished. This is a contingency plan." A crackling voice interrupted them, an unfamiliar tone cutting through the radio waves. It was Kellen's voice, but there was something different about it. There was a sharp edge of urgency in it that hadn't been there before. "General Hale, Dr. Moore, I didn't expect this. I thought destroying the core would be enough. But the Xylorians have." He hesitated. "They've initiated their final protocol." "Final protocol," Hale repeated, leaning closer to the screen. "What does that mean?" Kalen's voice grew frantic. "It means they have a backup system. It's not just about the ships. They've linked the entire fleet's destruction to a network that spans the entire planet. You've only bought yourself a few hours, at best." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? How could they?" "They've infected every major city on Earth with a nanite-based virus," Kellen cut her off. "Once their core reactor was breached, the virus activated. It's embedded in every system they've shared with you. Communications, weapons, infrastructure. It's already too late. You can't stop it." Hale's face went pale as he digested the implications. The Xylorians had anticipated humanity's every move, and with the virus now spreading, the very technology they had gifted Earth was weaponized against them. It wasn't just the fleet that was lost. It was the cities, the military bases, the infrastructure they'd worked so hard to rebuild. Humanity's reliance on the Xylorian technology had been a death sentence, and now the planet was infected. Rachel's mind was racing. There had to be a way to reverse it, some way to fight back. But she knew, deep down, that the Xylorians were far more advanced than humanity had ever anticipated. Their plan had been so carefully constructed, so meticulous, that Earth had no chance of truly being prepared. This was no invasion. It was a systematic collapse, one piece at a time. "They've crippled us," Rachel said softly, almost to herself. "This was never just about a fleet. They've infected our entire way of life." Hale slammed his fist on the table. "So, what do we do now? We can't just sit here and wait for the world to fall apart." Kalen's voice, though strained, came through the comms again. "You need to find the main control node. There's a terminal buried beneath the Earth's surface, a facility in the Arctic. If you can reach it, there's a chance to stop the virus and shut down the system. It's your last shot, but it's going to be a race against time." "Understood," Hale replied. "Dr. Moore, get a team together. We're heading to the Arctic." Rachel felt her heart race as she processed the magnitude of what was at stake. They were no longer fighting just to survive. They were fighting for the very future of humanity. If they couldn't find the facility, if they couldn't stop the virus, the world would fall into chaos. The Xilorians would not have to conquer them by force. They would let humanity tear itself apart, using the very technology that had been given in trust. She looked up, meeting Hale's gaze. "I'll prepare the team." Hours later, Rachel, General Hale, and a small elite force stood at the edge of the Arctic landscape, the cold biting at their skin as they stared down at the underground facility hidden beneath miles of ice. It was their last hope. But the journey ahead was fraught with dangers, alien and environmental alike. The fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. As they made their way into the facility, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the Xilorians were always one step ahead. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The cold was unbearable, biting through the layers of protective gear Rachel Moore had donned, but it was nothing compared to the weight of the mission ahead. The Arctic facility loomed before them, buried deep beneath miles of ice, its entry point a dark, foreboding hole in the frozen ground. Above them, the sky was a bleak, unyielding gray, and the wind howled like a warning. General Hale surveyed the landscape, his jaw set in determination. "We need to move fast. The longer we're exposed out here, the more likely it is that the Xilorians will catch on. If they have any kind of surveillance system, it won't be long before they know we're coming." Rachel nodded. She'd been to the facility's coordinates before, but never under these circumstances. It had been a top-secret research hub during the early days of the Xilorian peacekeeping initiative. The technology they had helped to develop for Earth had been housed here. But so had darker secrets, ones Rachel now understood in full. "This place is more than just a data center," Rachel said, her voice low. "The terminal we're after is in the heart of the facility, but there's a reason no one's been able to access it since the Xilorians set up shop here. It's protected by a system we don't fully understand, a combination of alien tech and old-world Earth security." Hale nodded grimly. "I'm not worried about the tech. We're here to break it, not admire it." Rachel's eyes flicked nervously toward the entrance. She didn't share his confidence. They had no idea what lay inside, but she had a terrible suspicion that they weren't just walking into a facility. They were walking into a trap. The Xilorians were far from finished with humanity, and their every move had been calculated. They were watching, waiting. The team of operatives moved swiftly, navigating through the desolate ice caves that surrounded the facility. The narrow tunnels seemed to echo their every step, amplifying the sound of their boots crunching in the frozen snow. Rachel could hear the shallow breaths of her team, each of them focused, every mind fixated on the task ahead. But even with all the training and preparation in the world, there was no escaping the feeling that the walls were closing in. When they reached the heart of the facility, Rachel's stomach churned. The vast underground complex was nothing like she remembered. It was quiet, eerily so. The hum of machines, the soft flicker of distant lights, it was all gone. In its place, there was a hollow silence that made her skin crawl. She knew that silence meant only one thing. The Xilorians had anticipated this move. "Something's wrong," she whispered to Hale, who nodded in agreement, his face grim. Without warning, The facility's doors slid open with a sharp hiss, revealing a central command room filled with rows of flickering consoles. But as they stepped inside, the room's lights flared to life, and a sudden chill ran down Rachel's spine. The Xilorians had left a message, a warning. The screens in front of them lit up, displaying a symbol that Rachel immediately recognized. The Xilorian crest, but it was the message beneath the crest that made her blood run cold. In simple text it read, "We know you're coming." Hale cursed under his breath. I knew it. This was never about stopping us from reaching the core. This is about slowing us down. Rachel felt a shiver of dread. The virus. It's not just in our tech, is it? It's in the system. They've infected the entire facility. Exactly, Hale said, his eyes scanning the screens. They've turned this place into a trap. They've rigged it so we can't access the terminal. Every step we take is a countdown to our own destruction. Rachel gritted her teeth, trying to push the panic that was creeping into her mind. She couldn't let herself think about failure. Not now. Not when they were so close. The hum of the facility intensified as she moved to the nearest terminal, hoping against hope that there was a back door. But as her fingers hovered over the keys, a strange sound filled the air. An odd mechanical whirring followed by a clicking noise. Something moved in the shadows, something they hadn't seen before. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. Suddenly, from the darkened corners of the room, a group of Xilorian drones materialized. Sleek, angular, and deadly. Their bodies glowed faintly in the dim light as they scanned the intruders. Drones, Hale muttered, reaching for his weapon, his face hardening. We've been compromised. Rachel's mind raced. There was no time to fight. If the drones were here, then the Xilorians were already mobilizing. They had to act, and fast. But first, they needed to access the terminal. The room felt smaller, more suffocating with every passing second. Hold them off, Rachel said, pulling out a portable interface device from her pack. I can try to override their system. It's risky, but if I can get into the facility's core, I can reverse the virus. Hale nodded, signaling for the operatives to take positions. Gunfire erupted as they engaged the drones, but Rachel's focus remained solely on the task at hand. She connected the device to one of the consoles and began typing furiously. Come on, she muttered under her breath. Come on. Outside the room, the sound of reinforcements began to echo through the corridors. The clock was ticking. The room seemed to shrink around Rachel as she worked furiously at the console, her fingers dancing over the keys with a precision born of desperation. Every second felt like an eternity. The drones were relentless, their metallic bodies darting between pillars of shadow, their energy weapons crackling as they fired at her team. The sharp staccato of gunfire filled the air, but even as they fought back, Rachel could feel the growing tension. Time was slipping away, and the Xilorians had anticipated everything. Her eyes flicked over to General Hale, who was firing with controlled precision, his team falling into formation, doing their best to hold off the drones. But Rachel knew this fight wasn't just about guns and ammo. It was about the virus, the only thing that could still destroy Earth from within. The virus was inside the facility's core, and unless she could break its encryption, humanity's hope would be extinguished. Almost there, she muttered under her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The interface device beeped, and a progress bar flickered across the screen in front of her. It was barely moving, the virus-resistant firewall blocking her at every turn. One of her team members, Lieutenant Carter, shouted from the far side of the room. We're running out of time. They're bringing in reinforcements. Rachel glanced up, her heart sinking. She could see the glow of more drones forming outside the door, their shadows stretching across the floor like dark, inevitable death. A shudder of panic rippled through her, but she pushed it down. Focus. Just focus on the task at hand. The interface beeped again, this time more insistently. The progress bar was barely a quarter of the way through. She could feel the heat of the room, the weight of the mission pressing down on her. There was no guarantee that what she was doing would work, but if it didn't, the Xylorians would have won. A sharp crackle from the comms broke her concentration. "Rachel, you need to hurry. They're deploying the final wave." It was Hale, his voice strained with urgency. Rachel's pulse quickened. She could see the drones advancing, their sleek forms darting into position. The only way to stop the countdown to destruction was to break through, to override the Xylorian control system in time, and every passing second brought them closer to the edge of failure. Her fingers moved faster, her hands shaking with adrenaline. Please, please work. Then, just as a wave of drones broke through the door and the first of them fired, there was a sudden flash of light from the console. The progress bar hit 100%, and the terminal chimed with a victorious beep. "I'm in." Rachel gasped, barely able to believe it. "I've got control. I'm reversing the virus." The room exploded into chaos as Hale and the rest of the team opened fire on the drones, holding them back just long enough for Rachel to access the control node deep within the facility's network. For a brief, glorious moment, she believed they had done it. They had won. But then, the screen flashed with a new warning. "Security override. Core shutdown sequence initiated." Rachel's heart sank. No, they're initiating a fail-safe. The Xylorians knew we'd break the virus. This entire facility is going to self-destruct. Hale's face went pale. "We need to get out. Now." The room began to shake as alarms blared, the walls vibrating with the hum of energy powering up. Explosions echoed from deeper in the facility. The core had begun its countdown, the final contingency plan triggered. "We're not going to make it," Rachel said, her voice steady but laced with regret. She knew what had to be done. "You have to leave. The core is set to overload. I'll stay behind and lock the terminal." "Don't even think about it," Hale snapped, his voice filled with determination. "We're not leaving anyone behind." Rachel's mind raced, but there was no time left for debate. The core was going to explode, and they couldn't all survive. She had just unlocked the system. Her mission had been completed, but now there was no escape from the truth. The facility was going down, and there was no way to stop it. She reached over and slammed her fist into a secondary terminal, locking the facility's doors. "Get out now, General. It's the only way." Hale hesitated for just a moment, his eyes locking with hers. She saw the weight of the decision in his gaze, the unspoken words. But then, without another word, he turned to his team. "We move now, or we die here." With one final, lingering glance at Rachel, he led the others toward the exit. Rachel watched them run, her heart heavy with a mix of pride and sorrow. She had done what she needed to do. Now she had to ensure that the Xylorians wouldn't win. The countdown had begun in earnest, and there was no turning back. The terminal she'd accessed would shut down the Xylorian systems, but it would also trigger the facility's self-destruct, taking everything with it. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, willing herself to focus. She took a breath. She had one last choice to make. She hit the final sequence. The countdown sped up as she sealed herself inside. In the darkness, there was only silence,